Hi guys, it's Blackie and Bear with another installment of the old Wayz, and this is number what? 8? Old Wayz number 8. Okay, we're going to talk about lanterns and stuff like that in a minute. First, I got back from the Pathfinder gathering, and I had several of you that I already mentioned in an earlier video that I got several items, and I've had several people ask me to show them what the items are. So I'm just going to do real quick of that. There will be a video for each later on, basically. I picked up a World War II type canteen, metal, to go with my 1910 cover. This is a replica, but it's like the very first one I ever had. Right there. Another thing I got is these were being given away at the Pathfinder gathering as prizes. Was one of the Wazoo hats. This one's got pouches and pockets inside of it, and I'll show this later in an upcoming video. Something I've been wanting for a while is one of the little bitty grates that goes into a Pathfinder bush pot for baking. Now I've been baking in other ways, but having one of these small ones is just handy, and you'll be seeing some cooking coming up when it cools off a bit. We'll start, me and Bear's got plans to do some cooking videos for you then, and we'll show more of this type of stuff then. I got one of the Boreal 21 folding butt saws. In my Master Woodsman series, we're going to be talking about saws, and so I picked me up one of these folding butt saws because it's very compact, easy to store, and it's a handy saw. On Canteens, from one of the vendors up there, had one of the 2-quart classic Boy Scout canteens. I always wanted one of these and never could get one.
That's what I had.
You had 2?
Scouts. I had that one.
I had the 1 quart.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to pick up one of these 2 quarts and just never did. And I looked over and this guy had it laying there and it's in just great condition. And so I decided to pick that up to add it to my set. I'll be cleaning it out like I did in a recent video and getting this back up and operational, and it'll be going back to the field with me.
Yeah, this is just like the one that I had. Those
are great. And then I was gifted this while I was at the event. This is another one, but it's exactly like the very first Boy Scout canteen I got. I wanted one of them, but the place I went to didn't have them back when I was a kid, because they did have a Boy Scout display, and it was the old Rose's department store.
That's where I got all my gear.
It was a clothing store basically, but they had a Boy Scout section.
Yeah, it was in one of the shopping centers.
Yeah, shopping center over in Ozark, same place you went, I went. And they had like the Boy Scout knife and the mess kit and just a few small things. And they had one of these pack canteens. It's got a clip on the back of it for sliding down in a yucca pack or carrying it on your belt. And so that was I got it to go back in my collection to kind of replace something I lost a long time ago. But that's that. From Possum Pouch and Bomb-Proof Bushcraft, I got one of the 3-legged stool chairs. We're going to be doing a video on this. And it allows me to be able to carry a chair that I can make myself in my haversack. See how it folds flat. We'll be dealing with this. You put 3 legs in it, and essentially you got a stool to sit on. And all you got to do is just cut 3 inch and a half diameter poles, round them on the top, make them the right size and put together. We're going to be doing a standalone video with that. I also picked up some of the Red Eye Hog. Basically it's fixing wax. It's in a tube, but it's based on lard instead of the other stuff. And so I want some of this for zippers and stuff like that and for other things. So I'll be talking about that later.
Didn't you tell me this could be used as a first aid item?
I believe it can be used as a first aid item on the cuts and things. I haven't researched it in depth yet, but I know that a lot of the fixing wax can be used for chafes and things like scratches, seal up cuts,
right,
that type of deal. So I want to research and see how that does. And then like you saw in my video I've already posted, I got the Rogers & Spencer revolver. This is my big one. Plus I got the mini which I'll be doing a standalone. I forgot to bring it with me, the W.C. Collins mini knife. That will be taken out and done as a standalone video here pretty soon. So that's my trip, that's my new toys. You'll be seeing new videos coming up with these in the future. Okay. That was an ominous little thing. Sounded like power went out for a second. Oh, your phone? Okay. Usually they hum right before the transformer blows. Okay. What we're going to talk about this time, guys, is lanterns. We had talked in the past about how we lighted these old homesteads and things like that. And obviously the number one thing used back in the days was some form of candle.
Exactly.
You could make candles from fat, pine pitch, stuff like that.
Beeswax.
Beeswax. Guys that had beehives, you got honey out of it, you got pollination out of it, and you got beeswax out of it. They would cut with other things in to make candles. I remember lard being mixed with paraffin to make candles.
Yeah, back when we were kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember candle molds
Yes.
that had been my grandmama's that we didn't use them. We had electricity, but she had candle molds because she said when she had first got married, about 1909, 1910, that they didn't have power. They didn't get power to the 30s, and so it was candles everywhere. Candles are oil lamps.
Yeah, it was Franklin Roosevelt's TVA that electrified the South.
The vast majority of it was candle power before the 30s, or oil lamps. A lot of times these oil lamps were in use because you could use so many kinds of oil in it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's start out kind of with the modern. Today, for lighting a off-grid or something like that, one of the LED lanterns of some kind that battery powered can be a real advantage. If you look at, I know Campmore has got it. They have these solar powered battery chargers, and these are designed for backpackers where you would lock in a battery and it's got its own little solar cell on it. The trick to it is go ahead and get like 8 or 9 batteries, and so I lock in 2 batteries, and if it takes it a full day or a day and a half to charge it up, no big deal. I just keep them in rotation.
Yeah.
One of these LED battery lanterns can give you light. Your average is going to be somewhere around 5 to 6 hours a night, from the time the sun
That's
goes
all
down
you
to the time
need.
you go to bed.
That's really all you need.
Yeah, and so with these things got a run time of 40 hours and things like that, you're looking at about a week on a set of batteries. So if I have fresh batteries to rotate in, and I've got a supply of fresh rechargeable batteries that are full, I take the ones that are dead and rotate them back in. I've got a year or two before I have to worry about additional light source. You see what I'm saying? So the modern like this does have an advantage as long as you have batteries that you can recharge locally by solar, etc. And for off-grid work, yes, something like this would be a real advantage. Of course, you're going to talk about having solar charger power your own LED lights for the whole building. But having some sort of light you can carry with you would be a big advantage. Now the Coleman lanterns, the big gas lanterns like this. When Bear and I were growing up, we saw a lot of these for night hunts, coon hunts, anytime you needed a light outside the house.
Just sitting out in the backyards on your average summer night.
A lot of times they'd use these lanterns. Now a lot of them were gasoline lanterns and white gas, which is Coleman fuel. All that is gasoline that they have not added the additives in they put in to run your car. So regular old pump gas will work in this for a time, and then it'll clog up the jet because those additives aren't as good to burn. So white gas, being clean, burns longer. But after World War II, you saw a lot of these lanterns. A lot of these were military lanterns that had come home, or etc.
During the war, the lanterns that they had would burn. You could burn fuel, and trucks, tanks, and airplanes all ran off the same juice.
Yeah.
And you could get a little bit of fuel for your lantern if you had the luxury of a lantern, and you could burn regular gasoline in one.
And when we grew up in the earliest days, I can remember, what was it, 1975 or 6, it's when gas broke $1 a gallon. Remember that?
That
The
was
gas
in
pumps didn't even go to $1. They only had
Yeah.
room for 2 digits.
Yeah, that was in 76. That was right after Carter took office.
Yeah,
77.
yeah, no connection.
No.
But that's when gas, before that, gas was like 28 cents a gallon, 38 cents a gallon. You know, exorbitant was 50 cents a gallon. And I was pumping gas at the old Park Avenue 66, and gas had just gone over $1 a gallon, and none of the pumps had the capacity to do that, so you had to half it. So we had to set it at 50, and just so if you came in and you wanted $10 worth, you know,
Pump 5.
pump 5, you know, it's the only way you could do it, you know, because the way it was set up, we had to work it out. But these gas lanterns have an advantage in off-grid, and I mentioned this while I was up at Pathfinder Gathering. There was a wonderful couple up there that part of a group, they collect old Coleman lanterns, and they had some from the 1920s. I was just impressed by the collection. But I pointed out something that I had seen coming up, where all these Coleman lanterns have this top nut, okay? What somebody had done is they had found a nut that had the same screw pattern, okay? And then they had taken a disc, a round disc about, I'd say about 10 inches in diameter, and they had that nut welded to a hole in that disc, so they could sit it up here and turn it. They'd unscrew this finial. Now this military one, that finial is attached to this. But a lot of the others, this finial is not attached and it'll come off. Okay? So they make it so that finial would come off, and they would sit up there and they'd spin that plate down. That plate would be sitting across there, and it'd give you a cooking surface. And so you could put a coffee pot on it or whatever. I saw those on a lot on trot lining and stuff like that at night, running pots of coffee. Being able to sit up there and put a pot of water on and put a can of whatever in and immersion heat it.
They're not real efficient, but they do the job.
The heat coming out will heat up that plate. It will not be an instant cook, but you're running this for light anyway, right? It goes without saying, you don't want to run these in a house unless you got all the doors and windows open, because there's so much fumes coming out of these. And so these were a big no-no in the winter. You couldn't run these in the house because A, it generates so much heat, and B, the fumes would build up in a house. So you had to have more than adequate ventilation. So, moving back now to the oil lamp.
Disclaimer, if there's any way you can get around it, do not use that Coleman stove inside your house. You cannot smell, taste, or in any other way detect carbon monoxide, and you'll go to sleep and you will not wake up.
Right.
Do not cook with a Coleman stove inside your house.
You got to be outside.
Please do it in a well-ventilated area, because we love our viewers, and we want to hang on to you as long as we can.
Well, not been that long ago, it was in the news about the old guy that was in the back of a camper, and he had a Coleman lantern. He thought he was heating up, using it for heat, and he asphyxiated. He had made him a bed in the back of his covered camper, tin camper like my redneck camper, and he closed up the door with that in there, probably trying to stay warm because it got pretty bitter cold, and died because the fumes build up. Like you said, you won't notice it, you get a headache, and then you just get sleepier and sleepier till finally you go to sleep and you ain't waking up.
Yeah.
It's replacing the oxygen. It absorbs in easier and quicker, and it's replacing the oxygen, and you're asphyxiating. So by the time you get to gasping, you're already unconscious. So you don't know it. So do not use these indoors. Cooking, you cook outside. That's the reason I saw them on a hunting camp, stuff like that, or out on a deck, or out actually in the back of a boat where we was fishing.
Or under a tent awning.
Yeah, under an awning, something like that. But you got to have complete ventilation. Now, what we saw a lot at the old homes was old kerosene lanterns and stuff. So,
You got a little green one right there.
yep.
I watched a very wise man with a very large hat a couple of months ago talking about the dangers of those things in a camping environment, I'm 100% on board. Those are very good. Now, something like this you can use inside.
Yes.
That's okay to use inside. This is not. This is under pressure.
Nope.
Okay?
This is okay.
This is okay to use inside, and it's just a different version of this. But those are good. Those are good. You can put those in a tent, but if you knock them over, they can be a fire hazard.
And a lot of people don't realize what you do is you lift up on this part and then you tip out, and out comes the globe. Like that. That's how you can take it out and clean it. Now I need to clean mine anyway. Now, with that out of the way, get up here closer, you can see it. You take and pull this, and that lifts off. And see that opening? That's where the fuel is. All that is just a airy little cap on top of it. There's no seal there. It can't be because it's got to suck air in. So that's what we're talking about. It's too big a danger because this gets turned over, the fuel's just going to pour out of it. Because if you tip it like that, any fuel level above that's going to leak out right here and start running. And if it's still running, and it can still be burning with fuel running out of it, you've got a major fire hazard potential. So a lot of people think this is somehow welded, or it's not. It's just a cap that's sitting there to hold that wick. And that's how you thread a new wick into it, is you take it out right here, thread the wick in, and then put it back in there. Because actually the bottom of the wick should be doubled over and sewn, so you can't run it completely out the top turning it. That's your clue of I ran out of wick. Because once the wick is pulled up and it comes out of the liquid, it no longer sucks up and it won't stay lit. And that was your clue to unlock it and look and see how much wick you got left. Okay, now tell them about the table oil lamp.
A couple of videos ago, we were talking about having lamps. I have several of these throughout my house. And it's like I said then, when you're in a situation where you don't have electricity, this is better than walking through the dark and stumping your toe. It's not great, but it will illuminate a room enough for you to walk around safely. You just lift the globe off. Your fuel goes in here. This has a screw-on mantle, and you put your fuel in through here. We were talking about this, the wick. See how easily that turns up? If you turn it down too far, it's going to drop out the bottom, burning into the liquid, and it's just, you might as well just set off a gasoline bomb, because that's what you just done. Anyway, one of the lanterns that I'm most proud of sits in my bedroom, on my chimney, on my mantle in my bedroom. It belonged to my great-grandmother, and to give you an idea of how old it is, she died in 1914.
Still got that lantern.
And I've still got it, and it still works. But this one, you can't tell it in this light, but this, you can adjust your flame up and down. But that's about right for a bedroom, or for a living room or a hallway. But that will save your toes.
Now the brightness of one of these lanterns, how you cut your wick. If you cut your wick straight across, you see how, you probably can't see there, but there'll be a saddle dip, 2 points in the flame. And what that means is it's wicking, but it's starving for oxygen in the middle because of 2 outer flames. If you cut the top of your wick kind of like a flat top like that, where it's flat across top, truncated, you'll have a center flame, and the center flame will be taller because it can draw air in better. That was something they knew a lot back in them days.
Yes.
But it's how you cut the wick when you put it in there. Now the procedure for running one of these lanterns is you're going to put the fuel in it, and you're going to let it sit a couple minutes, because that cotton wick has to soak it up. Okay? If you immediately, this is stone cold dry, you've never used it before, or it has been sitting here 2 or 3 years, the wick's dried out. And now I go and throw a flame on it, all I'm doing is burning the cotton wick. It'll take it a minute to start soaking up. So I need to put that fuel in there, and it will, by wicking action, pull it up. Take it 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes tops. Now I go to light my lantern. I simply touch a match to it on the side. The edge of it is kind of like a taco. You come to the side of it, and it'll run across on its own. You then put your chimney onto it, and then adjust the flame. What you're looking to adjust is the actual light producing band of it. Go too high and it's smoking. Go too low and you ain't got much light. So you can play with it and find out. Now this will change over the course of a couple hours due to atmospheric pressure, the lantern warming up, etc. Because as the heat is transferred from this flame to this thin metal that is the base, it will transfer down and eventually to the glass. That's one of the reasons a lot of these were glass, because glass does not transmit the heat well,
Right.
and so it would not get hot sitting on the deck. An all metal lantern of some kind could transfer heat, and so in some of the really old furniture, you'll sometimes find rings,
The burn marks.
a burn mark where the metal can would finally get hot enough over hours and hours of burning that it actually get hot and it kind of scorched the ground on the bottom. You didn't grab it. So that's when you see they weren't just doing it for decoration. They were for a point. But because the glass stayed cooler to the touch, it radiated heat better than a metal can did. Consequently, these storm lanterns that were all metal with these bales up here, you would often have a stick or something, you'd hold it, because that heat's coming out right there. And you sitting here holding it and that lantern's going good, your fingers get hot. Not in a minute, you can hold it. But if you're going to walk 2 miles at night holding this, trust me, you'll find a stick under that thing.
Those are also referred, the larger ones are referred, that style of lamp is also referred to as a barn lamp, a barn lantern, because they were utilitarian. They were fairly heavy gauge stuff. You could take them and put them in your barn and light them up and illuminate the inside of your barn. These were more for houses, and like I said, like we said a few weeks ago, when you go to put it out, don't touch this. This is hot.
Yeah.
And don't put your face over it and suck in a bunch of kerosene.
You don't over the top of it. Take your breath first.
Take your hand, put it here.
Blow at your hand, it'll turn.
And it goes out.
Likewise with these, when you pick it up from the bottom, assume that anything from here up can be hot. This top gets hot.
Yes.
And you know the old metal planters nuts cans, okay? There's a ring up here on the very top, okay, in addition to this handle. That's for grabbing and lifting it up, which you can just grab this thing right here. But I have seen people take that off and put a Pringles can over the top of this that would just sit over the top and use it as a coffee warmer or something like that, because it will heat it up. You don't want to smother it. You don't want anything tight, but just something sitting over the top of it right there. If you could get something that would balance on it or fit on it, you could do it like the big Coleman. A little bit of kerosene lantern, or the full size of this, can be cooked on. You're not going to cook fast. Kind of like cooking with sterno, but it will heat up meals and stuff like that in the field. But again, to blow one of these out, you pick it up, grab the bottom down here, and lift up your little side lever to elevate your glove. Then you blow across, puff, and then you let it down. Also, one of the most common things I see is the world is cold. It's cold room in here. It's in the 20s or it's in the 30s, and you come in and you go to light this, you'll crack your globe. This thin glass, that's really thin. So if it's really, really cold, if it's below zero or close to zero, you want to take that globe off and sit there and hold it a minute to warm the globe up. If you don't, you'll light that and it'll get going, and the heat will expand and crack it before it has time to warm up. I've lost. In fact, this lantern has got a crack in it for that very reason, because this was on a cold camp in January, and my good friend went to light it, and I told him, bring the lantern over here to the fire first and warm it up. He didn't. He just lifted the thing and he lit it. And when I got my lantern back, I had a cracked globe in it, because that, even though that's fairly thick glass, it can't take the temperature change. To keep the price down on these things, they don't make Pyrex globes.
It's not tempered glass.
It's not tempered glass, it's just plain glass. And so that's something that they don't really put in a lot of books talking about how to warm them. Our ancestors knew that. I remember reading a write-up from late 1800s of a miners' camp, and they had got home after some funeral, and the father had asked the daughter, they were going to light the lantern to see to put everything up in the barn. And so he pulled out the lantern, which wasn't lit because they had some moon, and he had the daughter stick it in her skirt and close her legs around it to warm it up for a minute or two while he got the basic horses unhooked, and then so he would light it and it wouldn't crack the globe. You know, they knew back in them days that glass was pretty fragile. And that's another thing. If you're going to heat up your homestead or whatever, if you're going to light it with kerosene lanterns or something like that, make sure you get a couple of replacement globes. They're easy to break. They're not as bad as like a Christmas bulb, but they ain't far off. And also, man, this is something to notice. The good quality ones, I'll get a death grip on this. I'll show you. The good quality ones, you look here at the end of the glass, and it's kind of rounded edge. It's like it bulges. The super cheap ones that a lot of times come out of China are not. It looks like they're cut. Those cut ones are going to split the first opportunity. You want this rounded edge. This is a real one, see. There are no seams in that. It's a blown piece of glass. So as this heats up, if there's any flaws, like a cut off edge, it's going to crack there and just run. This thing will bust in half right in front of you.
Really, the only maintenance involved is making sure there's fuel in the globe, and that you wash this occasionally. Probably once or twice a week will keep it. Like you were saying, the wick here will generate soot, and I've got it here on the inside of the thing so you can see it, where it has sooted up. The cleaner you keep your globes, the brighter the light you're going to produce.
Excuse me.
Back in our reenacting days, this lantern was a necessity in your pack.
Little folding candle lantern.
It's only one candle power, but it puts out 3 candle powers worth of light. If you'll notice, the brass here reflects the light. So you've got the power of 3 lights versus the power of the single candle. These are good for field packs, deer stands. They're good for just basic necessities. If you have one in your bug out kit, you've got a good source of light. It is fairly stable. Will it knock over? Yes, it will knock over, but you got to kind of try to get it to do it. This one, I've always wanted one of these. This is a UCO.
Modern candle lantern.
Watch me not be able to light it. Lock the glass into place, and there it goes. This is good for a modern pack. That's why I bought it. I found a couple of them on sale and I grabbed them. I've always wanted one.
That, and though you can get beeswax candles for this. Now, one of the reasons you see beeswax prized so much is that beeswax is the longest burning of the candle. You get more hours per candle. And a trick that I'll tell you if you're going to be using any kind of candles is put them in the freezer like a day or two before you're going to go do something, because the colder you make the candle, the more dense the wax becomes and the longer its burning time. So we would take the cheap candles, put them in the freezer for like 24 hours before, and then whenever we got actually out there to do it, they would last all night or most of the night on a single candle.
As it is, this one will last for 9 hours. Put it in the freezer, you'll probably get 18 to 24.
Yeah, they'll slow burn. Now that of course takes into account the environment, because right now we're with humidity right close to 100. Right now it's only 80 something, but it says feels like 99. So if the melting point of the wax is 175, we're 3/4 of the way there.
Yeah.
You know, in dead of winter, candles last longer because it's cooler. So, lighting your homestead, lighting your gear was a thing going back to Roman times. They used open fires, rushes, which are just long splinters that would burn, and we had fat lighter torches down here, and that was just strips of fat wood, which would be stuck into a holder and held out, long splinter of it, and it would burn. It'll burn several minutes, maybe even, depending on the stick, 10-15 minutes, and then you'd light another one. The problem with those is they dripped molten, burning pitch, and so you didn't want to get it on you, of course, and you didn't want to start a fire when you're walking. So there's a whole different mindset that our ancestors had to lighting. That's the reason they were so adamant about being up before daylight, getting out and doing as much farm work or whatever they could during daylight, because it was very difficult to light the night.
Yes.
And they'd come back to the house. Normally in any kind of cool time period, you had a fire going in the fireplace, and that was probably all the light they had. That's all they wanted. They would save these lanterns for when they didn't need the fire, or they needed to go somewhere out to the barn or something, or they needed to light a room to be able to cook or something like that and see.
Up until the 1820s, when they discovered, excuse me, when they discovered oil in Pennsylvania, this was the order of the day.
Candles.
Pretty much. And candles, like he said, were expensive. They, you could buy them. They were available, but they were fairly expensive, and you could make your own.
Tallow, mulberry, all kinds of stuff that would make a fatty wax.
But he was talking about what's called a rush lamp. A rush lamp was a thing about that tall, and it had a candle on one side, and it had this thing that looked like an elongated pair of pliers on the other. And the candle counterbalanced the plier. And what you would do is you would take this really cheap rush, or a piece of fat wood or something. Cattail burns very well. And you would take and pick up on your very expensive candle and put your very inexpensive rush into the plier looking thing and let it down, and it would hold it. You'd light the end of that rush, and that rush would burn a couple of hours. But it was a tenth of the cost of the candle. And if you had company over, light the candle, impress them.
But we're talking about, it had a flame like a birthday candle.
Yeah.
And Edison, when he was trying to argue for electricity, it was how many people who were damaging their eyes through straining, trying to see at night, because they worked jobs that required them to work in a factory at night. And they had gas lights and things like that. And we would talk about how, if we went back to those days, how dim the light was. True, your night vision would kick in, but you don't have the depth perception you normally do, and etc. And you're trying to run a machine. And it's like it's being lit by 2 birthday candles. That's it.
That's why when the Industrial Revolution got rolling really good, all of the mills had about 2/3 of the wall was glass to let as much light in as they could get. Thomas Jefferson had all kinds of very special chairs and tables and stuff that he designed and had built himself there at Monticello. And one of them was a reading chair, and it would pivot to catch the light during the day, but at night each arm had a candle, and he would have it. He had a book holder here in the middle, or a little swinging desktop to write on, and a candle on either side of it to write at night. Was it perfect? No. Did it work? Yes.
And that was considered extravagant and luxurious for his day. And one of the reasons we know about that chair is Benjamin Franklin wrote about it, because he thought it was such an extravagance to be wasting that much candles. He's a rich man. He's got his own, huge estate. And yet, Ben Franklin was talking about how he was being, extravagant by running 2 candles at one time. The term burning a candle at both ends. You had all the light, but it burned up twice as fast. Anyone that could afford to burn a candle at both ends. And they made candles, but that would just gut in a hurry.
Yeah.
But we would say like an emergency, where you just needed that kind of bright light in a hurry. Right now, doctors would quite often have very bright, with a mirror behind it, candles or lanterns or oil lamps, etc.
I have several oil lamps that have reflectors on them. Mm-hmm. They're all mounted to the walls, mm-hmm. and they kick out a lot of light.
Mm-hmm. More than you'd expect. I mean, when Bear and I were both doing living history, and you're coming into this and you have the concept, oh yeah, using a candle lantern. Until you've been out there and done this, where you're living a couple of days where every night you're using candle lanterns for firelight to do anything at night, set up camp, whatever, at night, and then after you've got used to it, and somebody turns on a car, or somebody brings out a modern light, and it's blinding, guys. I mean, it's like, God! Because your eyes have so adjusted to the night, and half of your night vision's in place. Most people today don't even use their night vision because you're living in bright homes, bright cities, things like street lights. You just don't have much night vision because you rarely ever use your night vision. You're rarely out in the dark without any kind of light to use natural light to see with. And I really think that's going to down the line come back to bite us. That, so many generations that never ever use their night vision. Just by genetics, we know that something you don't use goes away after a while. It would be terrible if we had an EMP from the sun and it knocked out all electricity and 3/4 of the planet is blind at sundown, with no ability to see at all at night, unless there's a full moon.
Portability. We kind of touched on portability. By the way, that is very hot.
Yeah, don't grab the top of one of them lamps.
Because it's been underneath a candle. This Yuko gets extraordinarily hot right there. But that having been said, that folds up to nothing. And we'll go into a belt pouch. We'll go into a haversack. We'll do, and the same thing with this one. This is it, open for use. This is it, ready to travel. Mm-hmm. It's very, very portable. Should the need arise, and I love that.
This is the old Stonebridge. World War I military issue had this type, late 1800s. And let me get it lined up right, because mine's a little finicky. Most of them are. If I get it lined up right in a second, it'll lock. But it's a candle lantern. And there we go, come on. There we go. Now, it's got a reflector on the inside of it. There's a candle goes right here, and these are not plastic, they're mica, to be a clear see-through. Back in the days, they had thin horn, whatever. That was a folding candle lantern to carry with you. That was a military issue in the day.
Or mica. Mica's a rock. It's a very thin layered rock, and you can prise it apart so you can get the layers down so thin you can see through them, just like this.
Mm-hmm. It looks like plastic to our eyes, but it's not. Now, one thing we need to touch on these is fuel for these type lanterns. This runs on Coleman fuel. This runs on gasoline. These run on lamp oil, which is liquid paraffin, kerosene, olive oil, cooking oil, diesel fuel. It will soot with the things beyond lamp oil faster. Could you put diesel in this and burn it? Yes. Could you put cooking oil in it and it burn? Yes. Any type of flammable oil that can be wicked up will burn. But you cannot ever put gasoline or anything that flashes like that. I've heard somebody say one time they put Coleman fuel in one of these. That's just gasoline. You're asking for an explosion, because gasoline and those derivatives, the fumes are what combust. If you were to have a bucket of gasoline and set it on fire and was able to get up there and look at it, you'd see the flames dancing right above the actual liquid. The liquid gasoline will actually put out a flame. How you get it? There's a question of that blowing up, but we used to do that demonstration in high school for the welding class. They'd put a cigarette out in gasoline and it wouldn't blow up because it was cold gasoline. Very few fumes coming off of it. If you put gasoline into something like this and try to ignite it, the fumes up here at the top are going to ignite and whoom. So you cannot put gasoline in any kind of oil lantern. Hence the term oil lantern. It has to be some form of oil. Olive oil, cooking oil, kerosene, diesel fuel, etc. will burn.
And diesel fuel is dicey.
Yeah.
Okay. Honestly, it's dicey. If you were in an absolute life or death situation, go ahead. Okay. We're recommending that be an absolute last
choice.
Resort. Last resort.
But you see how people, I can remember when I was young, a poor family that they worked at a local Dairy Queen, the lady did, and she would get the deep fryer oil and bring it home, and she had run it through a couple of passes of a colander with newspaper in it to act as a filter, to filter out the thicker chunks, and that's what she ran in their lamp oils.
The house probably smelled wonderful.
It smelled like French fries. You know, today that's biodiesel, you know, cooking oil turned into. Diesel fuel, like regular gasoline, has so many additives in it. It's the last choice to put into something like this. Technically it'll burn, but it's going to soot up, it's going to eat up the wick. It's just your last choice, there's nothing else. Paraffin oil, olive oil, a lot of salad oils. If it's an oil, here's how to find out will it work. Take a paper towel, roll it up in a crumple, stick it in some of the oil, get in a safe place, set it on fire, see if it burns. If it goes to burning real nice, okay. Can you do a test? You can take a small jar, twist up a small wick about the size of a number 2 pencil, a paper towel, stick it into about a finger's width of this oil, let it get all wet, take the top of it and light it. Does it make a flame and does it sit there and keep burning where it's wicking up? You've got an oil you can put into one of these lanterns. Simple as that. The old Aladdin's lamp was a oil lamp.
Olive oil.
Olive oil or whatever. It came out to that point, the famous genie lamp. That point was a small wick that ran back to the bottom and you opened up the top and put oil into it. That goes back to Roman times.
When we were kids, a real popular Christmas gift for kids was a little glass about this big that you could fill up with about halfway with like olive oil or vegetable oil, and it had a little plastic disc and a whole little bag of short cotton wicks. And what you would do is you would put the wick in the center of the little plastic thing, put it in the oil, and let it fill up around the edge with the oil, and it would float. And when the wick got saturated with the oil, you would light the wick and you had a little candle.
Oil candles.
And that's a modern version of what he was just talking about with the Roman lamp.
Yeah.
Also bedding lamps. They were called bedding lamps. They were round or metal, lamps with a point on them and a wick that ran up, and you would fill it with like bacon grease and saturate the wick. And they had a secondary cup underneath them to catch the drip, because the bacon grease would wick up the thing, and what didn't burn would fall off. And you had to have a container underneath it to catch it.
I've seen it where it was a square piece and they pinched the corners and made it where it hang. What it was, the wick holder, here's the corner. It would come up about a ½ inch short. There was a thing there held it up like this, so it'd be burning. And if it fell and dripped, it was still in the pan and fall back in the same pan. Like you said, you take bacon grease, any kind of fat or lard would burn in that. Make a lard candle out of it.
I had one bedding lamp that was dated from the late 1600s, and over the course of a ½ moves in 10 years, it got misplaced.
And a lot of stuff like that that we've had over the years have disappeared. I look back at one of the reasons you don't see a lot of this stuff is World War I, World War II, because the scrap metal, any kind of metal, people were told to turn them in for the war effort. So old lamps, old lanterns, old candle molds, all this stuff that those people had inherited from their ancestors and were no longer needed, because now you got electricity. And so they were turned in, and for the war effort, and remelted or done something with. And that's one of the reasons you don't see so much of this stuff, because it was recycled into war efforts. From a blacksmith point of view, a lot of things were made out of wrought iron. Wrought iron could be reworked infinitely. And so blacksmiths made a living out of taking a piece of wrought iron and like making a hook, and that might be the hook on that lantern for 30 years. And then that lantern gets stepped on by a cow and it's destroyed, and the scrap would come to him and he'd take that hook and turn it into awl or whatever, or melt a bunch of them down in the crucible and make another big item. They infinitely recycled them, and it's very difficult today to find wrought iron, this type of wrought iron, because what they were using in those days was hundreds of years old, and it had been recycled. It was recycled in Europe, then it was brought to America, etc. And they just constantly recycled it, and again, the two wars sucked all that up, and good luck finding a piece of true wrought iron.
Yeah, the smithy was a major component in any town, but he would make, like we were saying, he could make candle lanterns. He could make rush lanterns.
Well, you look at silversmiths.
Yes.
Silversmiths made jewelry. They made small stuff. Tin smiths made stuff like this.
Yes.
Those parts. Glass blower. So if you had a tinsmith and a glass blower near each other, they could make lanterns. Oil lamp. Add in somebody that had a really good loom that could weave wicks. There's a money maker. The job that the blacksmith always wanted to hire you to do is making nails, because they were a great money maker, but they were so time consuming to make each nail. And if you're willing to sit there and pound that iron for 12, 14 hours at a sitting, he'd give you a free meal,
That was good apprentice work.
Oh yeah.
A good apprentice with a nailing anvil could probably come up with 10 or 12,000 nails in the course of a day as part of his contract as an apprentice.
Well, that's the first thing they'd want to do. But by combining these storm lanterns, these DIS they call them, they came out of Germany and etc. But you start seeing a lantern similar to this showing up in the 1850s. And you see a lot of them referred to as railroad lantern.
Yes.
And then storm lantern. One of the reasons was railroads couldn't use an open candle because it's on a train moving. And the light on the front was usually a big oil lamp with a reflector on it to try to throw light forward so that they could see something on the track. Inside the cars they could have candles, And we read about this where they'd have a train wreck and everything would catch on fire because of all the open, flames.
You could also have these oil lamps.
Yeah, set on sconces like I talked about.
Like he was saying, in the original locomotives, they had an oil lamp that was about 4 times the size of this one, sitting in the headlamp in the box, and that would eliminate the track in front of them.
To some degree.
Yeah, it wasn't perfect.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you got any questions, please leave them below. Thank you, Bear, for another installment. And if there's something else you'd like us to talk about, put it down in the comments. We'll pick another topic. So till next time, guys, I'm Blackie and Bear, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.